June 4, 1943, the night America turned the lights on in a German POW's mind. At 10 p.m. on a hot Texas night, a prisoner of war pressed his forehead to a train window and watched something he'd been told could not exist. Electric light everywhere, farmhouses lit like ships at sea, street lamps blazing across crossroads, billboards humming, neon chattering, a constellation of power stretching mile after mile across the black prairie. In Germany, the blackout had swallowed the night since 1940. In the Reich's countryside, only 1 in 5 farms even had electricity before the war. But on Railroad Street in Mexia, Texas, June 4, 1943, the darkness was gone. Obergefreiter Friedrich Radke, veteran of North Africa, holder of the Iron Cross First Class, opened his hidden diary and wrote the treason that could have earned him solitary confinement if his officers had found it. The Americans must be lying to us. No nation can possess such abundance while fighting a war on 2 fronts. Then the train doors opened. Not boxcars, not cattle wagons, Pullman coaches, cushioned seats, dining service, sleeping berths. 1,850 veterans of Rommel's Afrika Korps stepped down to a small Texas town that had turned out to stare and to wave. They had arrived as prisoners. Many would leave as witnesses to the most devastating weapon in the American arsenal. Proof. He was a Nazi combat veteran on a night train through Texas, and the first thing that broke his faith wasn't a bullet. It was a light switch. The surrender and the first cracks, May 1943. Tunisia. General Jürgen von Arnim surrenders 250,000 Axis troops. The Afrika Korps, the men Montgomery respected, the men who had traded punches with the British from Tobruk to El Alamein, are suddenly POWs. At the port of Oran, Algeria, American order is the first shock. Thousands processed per day. Identity photographs, medical checks, vaccinations. Geneva Convention rights explained in fluent German by officers trained for this exact moment. Then the food. White bread. Coffee that tasted like coffee, not memory. Meat twice a day. For soldiers who'd learned to count calories like bullets, the mess tent felt like hallucination. In their diaries, they wrote it off as theater. Of course, the Americans would put on a show, except the show never stopped. The ships that carried them west were Liberty ships, 2010 steel answers to the question, how much can a democracy build if it decides to? One, SS Robert E. Peary, had been assembled in 4 days and some change. The guards told them this with a shrug, as if it were normal trivia, not sorcery. On deck, a radar dish turned lazily over the bridge. Radar on a cargo ship. Many German officers had believed only the Luftwaffe and the British possessed such equipment in limited numbers. Here it was, standard, like a lifeboat or a lifeline. Somewhere between Oran and Norfolk, proud men felt the first quiet fear. We have mismeasured the enemy. The country that shouldn't exist. Norfolk Naval Base erupted into view. Docks that ran to the horizon. Cranes prowling like iron giraffes. Entire forests of masts. In one day, a single American port moved more cargo than Hamburg in a week. Prisoners marched past parking lots packed with civilian cars. In Germany, automobiles were privilege. Here, dock workers drove to work. The guard apologized that the air conditioning in the Pullman car wasn't working properly. Air conditioning. The train rolled west. The darkness never came. Every town was lit. Every factory glowed on the night shift. In Roanoke, a water and coal stop took 30 minutes of mechanized choreography, automated loaders, electric pumps, powered tools. Workers wore leather boots that would cost a German laborer 2 months' pay. They smoked and threw away cigarettes half-finished. The waste felt obscene until the truth sank in. Waste is the shadow cast by surplus. By Tennessee, industry wasn't an abstraction, it was a geography. The Alcoa plant's furnaces drank more electricity than Munich. Kentucky's synthetic rubber complexes, built from nothing in a year and a half, produced in months what Germany, the inventor of the process, struggled to produce in a year. Near Detroit, the Willow Run bomber plant assembled a B-24 every 63 minutes. Through the windows, prisoners counted liberators by the dozen, half-born under a cathedral of trusses and light. The propaganda line, Americans build junk, died on contact with the assembly line. They crossed the Mississippi on the Eads Bridge and looked down on grain barges heavy as cities. Elevators lined the banks like fortresses. In Kansas City, stockyards steamed and sang. An American guard bought 20 hamburgers with a single bill. In the diary of a hungry man, the notation is simple and lethal. They eat meat as we wish we could eat bread. Barbed wire, steam heat. Camp Hearn, Texas, went up in 4 months. Electric lights in every barracks, hot showers, steam heat, flush toilets. The hospital stocked X-ray machines and penicillin, a miracle German doctors had only heard rumors about. American medics used it freely. On prisoners. In the kitchen, walk-in refrigerators, mixers that could knead for a regiment, dishwashers that made steam and music. Daily rations included fresh milk, eggs, meat, vegetables, white bread. Regulations required a 10% surplus to guarantee every man ate. The remainder? Thrown away. A former hotel chef cried into a trash bin. But the fence wasn't a wall, it was a hinge. By autumn, America's farm belt needed hands. Prisoners rode trucks past an encyclopedia of prosperity. Endless corn, oceans of wheat, machines that did the work of platoons. A teenage boy in Nebraska drove a tractor worth more than a German father would earn in a lifetime. In Texas, a cotton gin powered by the new rural grid chewed in an hour what a village would process in a month. The lesson was not subtle. America electrified its countryside before Germany had finished electrifying its cities. Power wasn't a miracle, it was policy. Abundance wasn't luck, it was logistics. Factories that didn't count under the Geneva Convention, food canneries, lumber mills, utilities, became classrooms. A Campbell's plant bottled a river of tomatoes with a skeleton crew of women and retirees. A power station drank coal by the trainload and spat out light by the megawatt. Across the river. The Rouge complex employed a city and made engines by the thousand. Parking lots looked like parades. The ideology that had marched them to war began to limp. The kindness they weren't ready for September. Italy surrendered. Italian POWs who cooperated got better pay, better quarters, more freedom. German prisoners watched their former allies working in American towns, eating in diners, sending money home, treated with a practical grace they had never extended in return. Then Christmas came. 500,000 packages arrived from churches and clubs and scout troops, cigarettes, candy, toiletries, games for the enemy. A church choir practiced Stille Nacht in German and sang through the wire. A Boy Scout, nose red with cold, handed a prisoner a card he had drawn with markers. Frohe Weihnachten. The mess hall served turkey and ham and pie until the air itself tasted like butter and thanks. Guards explained that this was a normal American Christmas. Everyone outside the wire would eat the same. If a nation can feed its enemies like this, what must it feed its sons? One camp commander personally delivered a Red Cross telegram telling a prisoner that his child had died in the Hamburg firestorm. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, and offered a chair. American churches sent parcels to German families, while American bombers still flew. The men who had been taught that democracies are weak met a stronger thing: confidence, the kind that can afford mercy. The classroom without walls. By early 1944, tens of thousands of POWs enrolled in classes: English, civics, economics, math. Universities mailed lessons. Professors traveled to lecture. A physicist conscripted from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute attended talks on atomic theory given by émigré scholars who taught enemies without bile. Camp newspapers, edited by anti-Nazi prisoners, shifted from clenched-jaw nationalism to debates about constitutions and markets. Movie nights screened Grapes of Wrath and Gone with the Wind. The guards didn't hide America's problems, they projected them 10 feet tall. In Germany, such honesty got you a prison number. In Texas, it got applause. June 6, 1944. D-Day footage arrived. 6,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft. Artificial harbors blooming like steel lilies. Supply tonnage stacking on beaches like mountains. Men who had believed in destiny watched logistics erase it. When the camps began screening liberation footage from Europe's hells, denial flickered and failed. Testimony, photographs, newsreels, letters from home, it all converged. The last fig leaves fell. Pride became grief. Then quietly, resolve. From prisoners to planners, repatriation approached. Before the war even ended, the U.S. Army was teaching its captives how to rebuild a country. Vocational training, modern agriculture, civics, management. They heard about a program that didn't have a name yet, the Marshall Plan, and understood the shape of the future. Rebuild, don't ruin. They had arrived believing that conquest creates prosperity. They left understanding that prosperity creates power. Between 1945 and 1946, 371,000 German POWs went home. Many wrote back to the families who had invited them to church concerts or shared sandwiches on a fence line. Thousands would eventually immigrate. Others became something else, vectors, carriers of ideas. They took American production habits to German factories, American agronomy to German fields, American civics to German councils. In the 1950s, when West Germany erupted into the Wirtschaftswunder, you could still see the fingerprints of a Texas mess hall and a Nebraska harvest. At a 1985 reunion in Austin, former prisoners stood beside the Americans who had guarded them and said the quiet part loud. "We came as believers in a lie. We left as students. You beat us with your factories, yes, but also with your freedom." Retention beat, the numbers that break belief. 500-plus camps across 45 states built in 90 days each. 371,683 German POWs in U.S. custody. 1% tried to escape. 0 permanent escapes. 95% rated their treatment good or excellent. 74% said captivity changed their worldview. 40,000-plus enrolled in courses. 135 camp newspapers. 8,000 took university correspondence. 14 million man-days of farm work, 230 memetas in 1940s labor value keeping America's harvests flowing. These aren't slogans. They're receipts. Liberty ships, steel hulls with radar on the bridge, and a birth certificate that says, built in 4 days. A cargo fleet turned people movers, carrying not just bodies, but ideas. On deck, a radar dish turns. In a mind, a gear slips. If the cargo ships have radar, the country that glows Norfolk explodes, cranes, docks, cars upon cars, air conditioning in a prisoner coach. The train rolls, and the night refuses to arrive. Virginia to Tennessee. Factories like suns, parking lots like parades. Willow Run punches out a bomber an hour. Barges move a harvest that looks like a continent in motion. A guard buys 20 hamburgers with 1 bill. In a diary, they eat meat as we wish we could eat bread. Barbed wire, steam heat camp Hern, electric light in every barracks, hot showers, steam heat. The hospital stocks penicillin for prisoners. Kitchens throw away surplus by regulation. A chef from Munich weeps into a bin. The lesson isn't cruelty, it's capacity, work details. Texas cotton gins roar on rural lines, the New Deal strung across the prairie. Nebraska tractors worth a lifetime of wages tow implements wider than a street. Campbell's runs with radios playing and elderly women supervising machines that do the work of 50. Across the river, a factory employs a city, and the parking lot proves it. Kindness that doesn't compute Italy surrenders. Italian units work freely, eat well, send money home. Christmas comes, packages by the 500,000. A choir sings Stille Nacht. Turkey and pie like an armistice. A commander carries a telegram about a child killed in Hamburg, hat in hand, voice low. Churches send food to the enemy's families. Strength, they learn, can afford mercy. The classroom 40,000 sign up for courses. Professors, some who fled Germany, teach physics to the men who once fought under the swastika. Newspapers in the camps argue about constitutions. Movie night shows American failures, on purpose. In Germany, truth is dangerous. Here, truth is policy. What actually won it wasn't only tanks and planes, it was the pattern those tanks and planes emerged from. Policy, power, plenty. Rural electrification, mass education, open debate. Industrial standardization, a culture that let immigrants teach and former enemies learn. These were not accidents, they were choices. And those choices did something artillery never could. They changed minds. The Nazis had bet that scarcity disciplines a nation into greatness. America bet that abundance frees one. Under barbed wire, with a plate piled high and a library card in his pocket, a former enemy learned which bet wins. Closing call to action. If this story surprised you, if it challenged the way we think wars are won, hit subscribe. There are more moments like this. Battles decided by assembly lines, hearts changed by hot meals, empires undone by a light left on at 10 p.m. in Texas. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what detail hit you hardest?